Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of An Action. I'm Tommy DiNucci. I'm here with Mike Messier. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, Tommy. Good to see you, buddy, and good to be here. And thanks to the loyal watchers that are tuning in. Some of them, like Stephen E. and Kim Kaling, on a weekly basis. So we appreciate that.
We do appreciate that. This is a fun time of the week for me. I'm actually doing it right now. It's one of the few times of the week where I really just get to shut my phone off and kind of put it down and just kind of reminisce on some movies and talk about some other things we got going on. It's been a crazy week. We're just coming off of Memorial Day. How was your Memorial Day weekend, buddy?
It was okay. I mean, I'd say probably I did see the Top Gun movie Maverick, and I liked it quite a bit. I've seen it twice already, and for what it's worth, that was a lot of fun. And although I do like the weather in Florida, this is kind of the tough time of year, and it seems like we're having a bit warmer summer this year than last. So the heat's been a little tough for me, but I was just in the swimming pool tonight, so I'm doing okay.
Well, that's a very American thing to do. Check out the new Top Gun movie on Memorial Day weekend. Uh, I had a pretty good Memorial Day weekend myself. I did a lot of binge watching
Yep.
of Stranger Things season 4, which if you haven't seen it yet, and I know Mike, you're not a Stranger Things guy. We're gonna try and convert you. It's really great. If you love pop culture, if you love nostalgia,
Yeah.
there's nothing like it out there. So I'm watching it, and I see none other than my old friend Robert Englund in
Yep.
a key episode playing a key character. And I say to myself, boom, right there. Mike and I had been talking about what are we going to do for a topic for episode 7. And right away I said, well, there it is. We got to talk about Robert Englund starring in the movie Incubus, which also happens to be my debut in front of the camera, where I actually get to speak. I had been an extra before that. Full disclosure,
Right.
I had awkwardly walked in front of camera a couple times prior to that. This was the first time I really got to speak. Really great story. A lot of origins. This is
Right.
definitely like an origin story. This is the first movie that Birdie Productions produced. The first movie that Chad Birdie produced. So we're going to get into the history and backstory of all that. But the bottom line is, we made a movie with the real Freddy Krueger. None
Yeah.
of this imitation modern bullshit. They made a remake with a different guy. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Robert Englund will always be the one and only Freddy Krueger, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and just kind of get right into it, man. So, Incubus, buddy. It was a movie that kind of started a little bit of a little bit of a movement here in Rhode Island where a lot of consistent films got made.
Right.
Uh, and this one's kind of fun because there's an interesting backstory to the script. It was
Okay.
written by a gentleman by the name of Carl Dupre,
Yes, I know Carl well.
who, Mike, you're a friend of Carl, but a lot of people might not know this. But does anyone remember a movie called Detroit Rock City? Because that is a Carl Dupre movie that I remember as a kid. I remember one, whatever it was, school day that I was homesick from school. And does anyone remember when you get to go to the movies, like you get to rent a movie because you were homesick?
Right.
And my mom took me into the rental store, and I got a couple movies that day, and one of them was Detroit Rock City.
Yeah.
So that was one of those movies that it's kind of one of those easygoing sick days. You weren't really that sick; you were just happy to be out of
Right.
English class, watching some movies, chilling on the couch, drinking ginger ale. So Detroit Rock City was sort of you know the
Sure.
anthem to that day. There's a ginger ale there. This show is not sponsored by Canada Dry, although if you're Canada
Could
Dry and you're
be.
listening, we're all ears. I love ginger ale
Yeah.
myself. So Carl Dupree wrote this movie, and Carl is a Rhode Islander. So a lot of
Yes.
Rhode Island connections in this one. This is
That's the
very
movie
much.
with the kids going to see Kiss, the rock band. Just to clarify for those that haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that when it came out, I think it kind of, it didn't exactly blow anyone away, like in terms of box office numbers. But it's one of
Right.
those movies that years later has become this cult classic. And as the legend and folklore of Kiss has grown, so has the movie. And it's one of those little kind of 90s darlings.
Yes. Oh,
So
you
that was
muted
Carl.
yourself. Man.
Go ahead.
Oh, you muted yourself for a second. Keep going, buddy.
Yeah, so that was Carl Dupre getting involved, and Chad Verdi got a hold of Carl Dupre's script and acquired the rights to it. And Chad Verdi is one of these guys who got into the business after already being established as a businessman of doing having a lot of other ventures. So when he first got into the movie business, it was all about making the movie, the Vinny Paz story. That was his number one goal. The first thing he did was acquire the rights to Vinny Paz's life and making that movie and getting that going. But it's very wise. He didn't want to just rush into that. That was kind of like his passion project. There's no kind of about it. It was his passion project. So he wanted to get a little bit of experience first. And at the time, we've talked about this on other shows, the horror movie craze was kind of really booming. This was
Right.
an era when we've talked about it before. It's the one character, one location, 10 actors, maybe one boogeyman type character to
Yeah,
kill
Saw,
everybody.
Hostel, all types of things were getting big at that time.
It was a time to make horror movies for sure, especially at a certain number. So Chad got involved. He acquired that script, and Chad was already working with a young up and coming filmmaker by the name of Glenn Ciano, who was working on the Paz movie and doing a couple of other things. And just it naturally went through sort of, I guess you could say, the assembly line creatively. Glenn did a little bit of work on the script. That's why you'll notice Glenn has a story by credit on the film. And they kind of started tinkering with the script, and originally we'll kind of just get into the plot. Mike, do you want to go over the basic plot points?
Well, I believe in this movie you play a security guard or a police officer type character. Is that true?
I do, but my part's very small. I was a young actor. I'm just talking like basically, the basic kind of gist of the movie.
Well, I
I
think the
figured
yeah, go ahead.
for anybody who hasn't seen the movie Incubus yet, we're going to give you the basic gist and plot points. But the unique thing about this show, and particularly this episode, it's not one of those things that you would even need to have seen the movie, because it's really all about a group of people coming together to make this film that really kind of started this little bit of a movement.
But I'll give you the basic plot. Incubus tells the story of a skeleton crew working the final shift at a soon-to-be demolished police station. The night takes a gruesome turn when the demon, known as Incubus, calmly walks into the station holding the severed head of a murdered girl. Incubus toys with the crew, allowing himself to be restrained, and begins to proudly confess to his litany of crimes, some dating back to the Middle Ages. Why? Incubus has a score to settle with the one detective that almost put him away around 13 years earlier. To their dismay, the cops quickly become pawns in Incubus's brutal crowning achievement of murder, gore, and mayhem. They ultimately realize it's his world, and they only die in it.
There you have it. So Incubus is your classic, good old fashioned, dare I use the word, although it's overused, throwback style horror movie.
Right.
And Robert Englund is right in the middle of it. So classic maneuver to. What do you do when you really want to come out? And it's almost like in sports when you got a franchise team and you acquire this team. What do you want to do? The first thing you want to do is you want to go out and make a big free agent acquisition, or
Right.
you want to go out and sign that person that you can bring in, and they're a star. It's like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signing Tom Brady to come in and win one.
Sure.
Chad makes this move where he says to himself, "Well, I'm making a horror movie. Who's the icon of all that is horror? Freddy Krueger." And boom, starts making some connections with the Robert Englund's agent, and sure enough, before you know it, we have Robert Englund for what's called run of the show. Chad was able to come to terms with Robert, and if you don't know what run of the show means, it's kind of a it's a big thing in a film production, especially for scheduling, when you can say that we have an actor for the run of the show. That means that you have them from day one to day whatever, whenever you finish, you have them on site, on location, the whole way through, which is huge because obviously if you've got to make a last minute adjustment, if you got to change something in the schedule, that person's going to be there the whole time, and it's a big advantage to have. A lot of times you'll see it, and we've talked about it before. We can really only afford to bring a star in for a couple days, 3-4 days, sometimes a week.
Right.
Rarely do you get that star to come in for the whole time.
Yeah.
So this was a big deal. We had Robert Englund on set the whole time, and from there it was all about building a cast around Robert. And that's when kind of Glenn and Chad kind of went to work and put together their bit of a, I don't want to say I don't want to say hodgepodge. That's probably not the right word, but it was really just like they picked sort of like unique characters and people that they had worked with in the past. For example, Mike, you had mentioned in the summary, the Incubus character is after an old wily detective. Well, that detective was played by William Forsythe.
Right.
Glenn had made a movie where I think he was just like a PA with William Forsythe years ago, but had a relationship with him. And Chad was able to contact the right people and make the right offer and get William Forsythe on board. So what do you have now? Now you have Robert Englund on one side, and you got William Forsythe on the other side, anchoring down this role. Really talented, classic actor. I mean,
Yeah. If
William
people,
Forsythe. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
one of William Forsythe's best roles, I think, is in a movie titled Weeds, which is a prison drama that stars Nick Nolte about a bunch of prisoners who start putting on their own theatrical performances inside the prison. And then throughout the years, as each guy is released from prison after serving his respective sentence, they meet up on the outside to continue to do their plays, which is about prison life. And Forsythe had a huge role in that. And he's done a ton of stuff. I'm sure he's done a lot of theater as well. So he's one of these highly tuned uh, monsters of acting in a good way, I'd
Yeah, he
say.
really is. He has that classic iconic voice. He has an amazing presence. Movies like everything from Raising Arizona to Out for Justice with Steven Seagal. He has a classic fight scene where he plays a character called Richie.
Right.
Him and Seagal kind of throw down, and that's like right in the midst of Seagal's prime. So it's like, to be playing the villain opposite to Prime Seagal is a pretty big deal. And then you get movies like The Rock, and even funny movie. I mean, he can do comedy too. Movies like Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo with
Right.
Rob Schneider. He's done it all. Devil's Rejects. So we had William Forsythe, and now we have a great kind of 1-2 punch with Robert and William. And from there, there's this other character that's shoulders quite a bit of the load, and that's played by Joey Fatone, and
Right.
that's kind of the young gun detective. And Joey, which everybody, of course, knows from the mega sensation boy band NSYNC, uh, Joey had been doing a lot of films and had, wanted to kind of, Joey's one of the most down to earth guys in the world. So please don't take this when I say this the wrong way. It's not that he wanted to separate himself from his boy band image, but
Right.
I think Joey had, a little bit to prove that he actually is a talented, well rounded performer and can handle a performance in a film that doesn't have to do with being funny, doesn't have to do with dancing or singing or anything like that. It's just a legitimate, classic old detective role. So Joey was in a movie called Homie Spumoni, which is a comedy that Glenn Ciano wrote. So there was that connection. They had stayed close. So it didn't take much for Glenn to get on the phone with Joey, a guy who'd been looking to do more roles that weren't comedic, more roles that had a little bit of, extra gravity to them. So when Glenn reached
Grit.
out to him and basically said, "Hey, I got this gritty detective role, Tom Coretti. Do you want to play him?" I wasn't in the room, but from what I understand, Joey was pretty quick to jump at the opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that was Glenn's first choice right off the bat. So now the cast is starting to round out a little bit. Excuse me, I don't know what happened, buddy. I got my throat's all
Little
jamming up over here. You have to
sinus
bear
things
with
there.
me. I'm gonna
You
have
need
a
to.
George. I'm gonna have a Jordan fever game. I'm gonna get through this though. Don't
You have
worry.
a water or something? You have a
I
beverage
got,
on you?
I have this. I have an energy drink.
Okay.
It's. I know it's not as good. Mike's a big water guy. I know you'd be mad at me for not drinking water, but
I'm I'm
we got to get through it, man. We started early today. Today was an
I'm too
early day.
drinking. I got the Dr. Pepper thing and the water thing, and well,
I think I saw
also
ginger ale.
I would say another great cast member. I'm sure you're about to hit on his name, but Jonathan Silverman's in this one too, right?
Jonathan Silverman came on board again through a casting agent that Chad brought on, and it was one of those things where I remember when I heard the name Jonathan Silverman that was even like a thing. I was so excited because as a kid, my sister and I would constantly watch Weekend at Bernie's. I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Maybe it was like HBO in the late 80s, early 90s, but for whatever reason, Weekend at Bernie's appeared to be on television at any given time in America
yeah.
from the years 1990 to 1995. Like at any point, you could turn your TV on and you'd see Jonathan Silverman
Andrew
hauling a
McCarthy.
fucking dead
Yeah.
body around with Andrew McCarthy. Yeah, like, and I mean that in a loving way because I
Yeah,
love the movie. I really think Weekend at Bernie's is. There are a few movies that I feel are like almost nearly perfect comedies and like just
right.
so well done, and that's one of them. And also just such a kind of a bit of a time capsule into the era, the late '80s era, which is really cool. But this show ain't about Weekend at Bernie's. It's about the movie Incubus. And we were happy to have Jonathan Silverman in this kind of again. He's playing like the snarky cop. He's
Yeah,
playing the kind of know it all, office guy cop, probably the cop that doesn't really mix it up too much, but maybe has to eventually. And
right.
in this movie, he's gonna. There's a moment of reckoning for Jonathan's character, and I got to watch back the movie. It's kind of weird, man. Like this is such a Rhode Island thing. If you're not from Rhode Island, I'll quickly explain that. But in Rhode Island, like it's so small that you tend to like bump into people that you wouldn't normally bump into. So here I am rewatching Incubus uh to get ready for this show because it's been a while, man. And I popped the DVD in
Yep.
and I'm watching it. And who's on the couch? Glenn Ciano, the director of the film. Because Glenn and I have stayed in touch all these years, and believe it or not, Glenn was the cinematographer on Johnny and Clyde, starring Megan Fox, which will be coming out towards the end of this year. So it's one of those things where it's just such a small world, and it was so fun to like
Right.
literally dust off my copy of Incubus, look at Glenn, and be like, "Bro, it's funny. We had a conference call because we're working on the colorization process of Johnny and Clyde. So we're waiting for our color spotting session. We had like 2 or 3 hours to kill. So it was like the perfect time. Like, do you want to watch this movie? I was like, I got to watch it for my show. And he's like, oh man, I haven't seen that in years. I was like, I haven't seen this in probably, I can't, you hear this a lot, but it's true. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time I saw it. And
Right.
this movie came out in 2011, it was shot in 2010. So you're talking like, there's a good chance that I hadn't seen this movie from start to finish in 10 years. It had been a long, long time. So it was
Sure.
fun to put the movie on, and I'm watching this scene with Jonathan Silverman in it. And it's a really cool, fun scene. Like he's trying to process Robert Englund's character, Incubus, and book him. And, he's trying to fingerprint him, and he doesn't have any fingerprints. And he looks for him in the file, and the name doesn't come up. And it's just it's a really well done scene. And it's an example of, if people go back and watch that, Glenn did a lot with a little in this movie in terms of like just simple camera moves, simple
Yeah.
camera actions, just like good old fashioned photography and letting the actors act and kind of owning the frame. So Jonathan Silverman is great in this movie, and he adds a really nice little bit of comedy, bit of nuance, and I think again it's just like a face that you're not used to seeing in this type of film.
I just think we go back to Glenn for a moment. It's just interesting how time flies so quickly, Tommy. Probably when you guys filmed this movie, I would guess Glenn's daughter was maybe 1 or 2 years old, or maybe not even born yet. And flash forward 10 years, and you're directing Glenn's daughter in Mr. Birthday, and she's basically the lead character. So,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is
that's
really
just shows
funny.
you how time flies, man.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I remember Charlotte Ciano, Glenn's daughter, literally like playing with toys on the floor of Glenn's office while we
Mhm.
were prepping the movie. Like throwing a toy bouncy ball around the room or whatever. And like you said, we've actually made a movie which she had a lead role in and did a terrific job. So yeah, time is a weird thing,
Yeah,
especially when you see people age. And I got a little bit of that in this movie, man. Seeing myself, I told
sure.
Glenn, I was like, "Wow, who's that child on camera?" I had this kind of buzz cut and all that, but we'll get into my character later. There's a couple other characters I want to talk about, like Michelle Ray Smith, who Michelle Ray Smith was really cool, and she was a soap star for many years, model, actress, soap star. Was on, I believe, Guiding Light. Did a number of episodes, and had done other, film and television, and I believe she was based out of New York. And she came in and was just immediately like great working opposite Joey. They had a really nice natural chemistry that kind of sold on camera. And um, again, we got a really cool cast coming together for this movie. You got to love the effort Chad and Glenn put in to just like make sure that just about every part was going to be solid and someone that you could kind of hang your movie on. A couple other characters, like for example, funny, not a big role, but a funny role. We have Mike Cerrone playing the role of Mudge, who's sort of like the over the hill officer.
Right.
And a lot of people might not know this, but Mike Cerrone is a collaborator with the Farley brothers. In
Okay.
fact, he's got a writing credit alongside Pete and Bobby Farley on Me, Myself, and Irene. He's got a writing credit on the Three Stooges movie. He's in movies like Kingpin. He did a lot of cameos in a lot of their big movies. And the cool thing about Mike is he's literally just like one of the funniest human beings alive. Like he's
Right.
one of those people that when you're in the room with him, he's got an electric power through him that just can charge a room and just make everybody laugh. And it's incredible. It's like nothing I've ever seen. And so much so that the Farley brothers lived next door to Mike Cerrone and his brothers, the Cerrone boys. So I've been told that a lot of the humor that you see in the Farley brothers movies actually comes from the Farley brothers observing the Cerrone boys and how they were acting with their father,
Right.
who, a legend, I believe he's passed since, but the legendary Smokey Cerrone, who was a car owner and dealer and a bit of a local celebrity in the Rhode Island, Massachusetts area. So Mike Cerrone comes from this like long line of comedy, and it's rich and it's goes all the way back to the Farley brothers. So it was really cool just to have him on set. Um, since then, we've worked together on a couple things. That's Mike Cerrone. Diane Kane came in. She played like this really great kind of stoic doctor character. And I have to talk about my good buddy Kevin DeCristofano,
Oh yeah.
who we're gonna go take it back to New England Tech, and it was like literally my first class in film school. And my name is Danucci, and Kevin's name is DeCristofano. So you know how alphabetic seating charts go. Like I sat right next to him, and I remember like we literally just like looked at each other. It was like almost out of a cartoon. It's like, all right, well, I guess we'll be friends then. We're gonna have to sit next to each other, and we just became buddies. And we worked together on that first project just because he was sitting right next to me, and worked together on everything else from all the way through film school. Wrote a bunch of scripts together. In fact, Kevin is a co-writer on my Christmas movie, Saving Christmas, which we're going to do later on in the year when we get closer to the holidays.
This is
But
Pop Culture Kevin. I think I gave him that nickname eventually, right?
yeah, pop culture Kevin, because Kevin is a wealth of pop culture information. That eventually got abbreviated down just to PCK, I think.
Yeah, I think it
But
did.
yeah, pop culture Kevin DeCristofano. He played this kind of like shaken up guy who's just a young college guy who's making out with this girl and she's on top of him, and then all of a sudden her head gets cut off. And
Right.
when the
I hate when
cops
that
show
happens.
up,
Yeah.
you hate when that happens. That's a very unfortunate situation when the cops show up
Right.
You've got your severed girlfriend's head on your lap. You saw a shadowy figure kill her,
Right.
but how are you gonna explain that to the cops?
Yeah.
So Kevin's character is basically, we meet him, chained up against the wall, given his side of the story to Detective Coretti, aka Joey Fatone, and the rest of the cops. So this part required a bit of a monologue and a lot of emotion. And Kevin was great, man. Like, actors are funny. Like, I remember being like there. That was shot on day one, and I remember I'm a cop, and I'm just like in the background, like acting like a fucking meathead. And I remember like I think I might have I don't even have a line in the scene. I just like go over to whisper at my partner, and then I get yelled at, and I have to like sheepishly back off. And I remember like standing there doing that bit and seeing Kevin like carving up this awesome scene. He's fucking crying. People are like after patting him on the back. What an amazing job. This guy's so good. And I remember being like, God damn it. Like hi- his part's fucking better than mine. Like, how come I get this part? Like, what the fuck, man? Like, we can't help but do that. And then after I remember going up to him, like, yeah, you were great, man. It was fucking good.
Yeah.
Shit, you fucking cried and everything. Like, not that again, like it wasn't a competition, but as
Right.
actors, we can't help but like
Sure.
always, in our minds make everything a competition, especially when you're young and you're coming up. And so that was kind of funny. Kevin did a great job that day, and the performance holds up, man. That performance required a very strong, solid delivery because it kind of the whole movie hinged on it. But I do remember a really cool moment with Kevin being in our like, we had a little shared dressing room, which was cool. And I remember like going into the production and all of our clothes were kind of laid out. And I was like, oh, this is pretty fucking crazy. Like you and me are
Sure.
together on this big movie and we started together and like, wow, this is just like really cool. It's just like a genuine, like we both got called up to the big leagues in our minds at least. And we're playing on the same team. So
You're
like, how
going to
cool
the
is that?
show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's to be like, it'd literally be like, again, I'm sorry if I make too many sports references. I can't help it. I watched a lot of goddamn sports movies growing up, and I played sports, and it's just how my brain works sometimes. But it's like going up. It's like playing college baseball with your buddy, and then you both wind up on the same pro team. They get
Right.
drafted to the same team and end up on the same roster. It's like, wow, that's fucking crazy. So once in a while, you got to embrace those moments and be appreciative of them. And I was appreciative to be working with Kevin.
It's cool that
Um,
you could recognize that moment as it happened too. And Tommy, when you were talking about how you're kind of watching Kevin tear it up in that scene, and you're still happy for him, but kind of a little bit envious in an actory type of way, it reminded me of the old joke. If you ever seen this joke, which is how does an actor read his script?
oh,
Bull, it's bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Ah, my part, bullshit, bullshit,
bullshit,
bullshit. My
bullshit, my
part,
line. Yep.
my
No,
part, my
totally.
part. So
Yeah,
that
we all
reminded me of
care.
that.
Yeah, we all care about everyone about as much as this much less than we care about ourselves. We
Right.
can't help it. It
But
it is what it is.
he's a
But no,
great guy.
Kevin
I
was
think he
great,
got
and
married at
Mike.
some point. Yep.
To be honest with you, Mike, I think I took credit for it after, and I was like, "Well, guys, who brought in Kevin? Who told you about Kevin? I did."
Right.
So I'm sure I found a way to spin that in my favor. And of course, another kind of mainstay that's been in a lot of my films and a lot of movies that Chad's produced. Fred Sullivan
Oh yeah.
plays a part in this movie as basically a psychiatrist who kind of comes in to crack a bit of the code that this mental trauma that Joey Fatone is suffering from. And the unique thing about Fred's performance and his whole bit is I think and again this was like 10, 11 years ago so actually more than that, so don't quote me on this, but I think Fred's footage was shot a month or 2 or 3 even after we shot Incubus because Glenn had put together a cut and just wanted to add a little more connective tissue story-wise, and this was a way for him to do that and kinda easily bring a talented actor in. And I remember Fred was a guy who was at the time known as just my acting coach. He had been kind of there and people had known him as my acting coach. and I believe he even helped cast a couple characters in this. Like there's a character that's played by a I don't even I will check the credits, but he was a Trinity rep, I believe a Trinity rep student, which is a theater here in the Providence, Rhode Island area. So Fred was already kind of on the radar of Glenn, and then it just made sense to cast him to play this part. Um, but let's talk a little bit about the production of this movie, and then of course we don't want to bury the lead. We're going to get into it and talk about the one and only Robert Englund. But what made this movie kind of unique was the fact that it all took place in a police station. It all took place in an abandoned police station. When I say abandoned, I mean I shouldn't say abandoned. It's as if the local precinct had just opened a new police station, and this was the old police station, and all the cops were on their way out and moving to the new location, but they were still operating out of this one with a skeleton crew.
Right.
So this is where the Robert Englund Incubus character decided to come and shake up because they were kind of they were down in their
Vulnerable.
numbers. And keep in mind too, this was the original police station, which was about to be knocked down, which is where all these heinous acts occurred years prior. So there was a connection to the building. And in real life, we had the building, which was the Cranston Police Station, which is no longer there. I think it's actually a Dairy Queen right now. But this was such a cool building and so useful and functional as a set because when you think of a police station, what do you think of? Well, they got, usually you have wide hallways, you got big rooms, open spaces, you've got sometimes elevators, you've got a loading dock, you've got an area like an intake area where you would put a police car, like a garage. If that's all removed and gutted, it suddenly becomes like the perfect mini studio where you can like build sets in these giant rooms and big sets of double doors. And we actually needed it for a police station anyway. So the production design was, I don't want to say simple because, of course, Glenn did a lot to tweak it and make it look the way he wanted to look. But for the most part, a lot of the props that were needed, a lot of the art direction that was kind of right there. It was like everything that was needed was there. There's certain things it's so funny. Like as I'm watching this movie, you see like the old PA like loudspeaker in the hallway. That's just like something that's like gone. It reminded me of like if you went to an older public school, a lot of the rooms would
Oh
have
yeah.
that clunky ass old speaker
Public
hanging
address
on the
system.
wall. Yeah, the
Right.
public address. And I remember that was going on in this movie, and it's just funny to see all these things. But for me, thinking back, I can't help but yeah, you watch the movie, but I think about everything that happened behind the scenes, and it was really cool for me as an actor to come into this movie. Again, this is the first time I'm speaking. This is Chad's debut movie. This is the first time he's producing a movie. So he went really big on this one. I remember everything being like very big. And what I mean by that is, the catering was intense. There was a lot of, great food. The props that were bought. Like I remember there was a TV show called Bunker Hill, which starred
Yeah.
Donnie Wahlberg.
Okay.
And the show just didn't really take off. And I remember the production company that Chad's production company acquired just about everything in a matter of like 2 or 3 truckloads. And I remember one day, like literally an 18 wheeler filled with props and furniture and clothing and everything from the movie just backed up to the back of the Cranston police station, and just a bunch of interns just went on like a relay race, kind of emptying out this truck. And
Which
that's where we
was the
got
Bunker Hill stuff.
this was all this defunct Bunker Hill stuff. So there was an
Right.
excess of props. There was an excess of wardrobe. And I guess this is a fun time to segue how I got involved in this movie. I did not audition for this part. This was not that kind of a deal. This is a really kind of a funny story. Glenn Ciano and I both kind of came up through the same I guess you could say, mentor at the time.
Sure.
And we both kind of just were drawn to each other, you know, we got along. And we had been working on a movie where he was going to make his directorial debut, and I was going to make my debut in front of the camera. And it was a movie called Soul, Soul. And it was about a, believe it or not, I was young enough to actually play this fucking part at the time, but it was about a high school baseball player who interacts with his deceased gangster father, who's like a spirit. It was kind of like a funny version of Ghost with like a coming of age twist with a little gangster play. It was
Sure.
cool.
Yeah.
So Glenn and I were getting that movie off the ground, and I remember we were really excited about it. We had raised even a little bit of money, and then Glenn started really building traction with Chad and building that relationship. And to Glenn's credit, when things really started to steamroll and Glenn started to get some really cool opportunities, like working with Chad and like making a feature film for Chad, the movie Soul kind of, you know, naturally sometimes certain candles will fade and others will burn brighter, Mike.
Right. Sure.
And the Soul fade kind of faded, so much so that we actually gave the money back, the money that we raised, you know, another
Mm.
tribute to Glenn. Like a lot of people would have cashed the check and been like, "Yeah, sorry, it says in the contract sometimes shit happens."
Right.
Glenn didn't do that. He gave the guy the money back and said, "All right, you know what? We're not gonna make Soul. I got to go direct this movie. I'm working on this Pads project. I got a lot going on." So I was disappointed for a second, but I gotta say, to Glenn's credit, he was like, "Tommy, listen, trust me, I will make sure that you get something really cool in this movie if it goes." And because at the time it wasn't greenlit or set in stone, it's
Right.
basically like one of those like, "Don't worry, like I'll take care of you on this because we were gonna do this together and now we can't, but you know it ain't over," kind of a thing.
Mm.
And to his credit, you know, part of the deal was, and you know, I don't know if he again, like I wasn't my relationship wasn't as tight with Chad at the time. I was kind of just a young guy coming in. Glenn had kind of had already had the meetings with Chad and had already built that relationship. And it was one of those things where I kind of came in and I think Glenn was just putting in the good word, like, "Hey, this is Tommy.
Right.
He's gonna help out with the production. He's gonna do a lot of the dirty work and the grunt work for us before the movie starts. And in return, he's gonna play this part." You know, Pax was the name of the character. And Glenn literally, because I told you Glenn did a little work on the script as well. Glenn like literally wrote that part for me and sketched it out for me, and you know we worked on it together a little bit. It was really cool to have that advantage going into things for my first film. So that being said, I worked my ass off in prep to try and do everything I could to repay Glenn for making sure
Sure.
that, you know, he solidified that spot for me. Because if you watch this movie, and I kind of said to myself, like, shit, I was in a really great spot in this film. There's not a lot of characters in it. Like, as I
Right.
go and I write them down, like, you know, this really is one of those, you know, I don't want to say formulaic in a derisive way, but it's like, you know, 10 characters and everybody kind of one by one gets picked off, and it's the classic horror formula.
Right.
So I worked really hard. I did everything from, you know, literally, it's a cliche, but like, yeah, I swept the floors. I'm pretty sure I cleaned the bathrooms. I'm pretty sure I mowed I don't even know how to mow a fucking lawn. I was never really much of a lawn mower
Yeah.
or a lawnmower. And
Right.
I figured it out and like did some, you know, basic yard work and landscaping on the building to make sure that it was presentable. Because the building really had been abandoned by the city of Cranston.
Yeah.
So needless to say, we all worked hard. We got the movie going. A gentleman by the name of Rob Fitz came in and did a lot of the special effects. I remember it was really cool, like a couple weeks out, like in prep, being like you know, essentially an intern on this set. I remember like and just to be clear, obviously all this time I wasn't getting paid. Like that was all like sweat
Sure.
equity. That was all like me showing up at, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning and meeting Glenn, and whatever needed to get done that day, it got done. And that went on for like,
Cutting your teeth.
you know, yeah, that went on for a couple months, you know.
Right.
So basically, I remember just like sneaking into like the effects room a lot and just finding like being fascinated by seeing like all of the, you know, different body parts and gore and, you know, horror implements. So that was kind of just, it was cool to see. And again, I think Chad learned a lot in this movie too. I know he learned a lot because there was definitely a level of excess production wise. You know, just like we probably didn't need that. You know, we didn't probably didn't need to buy an entire 18-wheeler worth of, you know, furniture. We probably didn't need to get all of the wardrobe. So it's one of those things where I think that it was such a great film because everybody learned so much to get
Right.
things going and what really needed to go on. You know, how else do you really learn how to do these things other than by just doing them?
Yeah, learning
Um,
on the job, as they say.
exactly.
Learning on the job. Tommy, if I could, special effects are very interesting. Can you, for the viewers that may not know, describe a little bit of the difference between what's called practical effects and what we see a lot these days, which would be CGI or After Effects or editing effects?
Yeah, you know, one of the real focuses on this movie was trying to make it feel like it was of the Nightmare on Elm Street era, you know, the Freddy Krueger 1980s cinema era, which was very rich in practical effects, you know, not having CGI, no computer generated gags of any kind, like all
Right.
real deal effects. So that means that it's really a magic trick, you know. It's really one of those things where you have to use camera angles, you have to use certain types of gadgets that are made, whether it's, you know, blood that gets pumped through a tube that gets hidden through the actor's wardrobe, and then there's a little cut that's made in the wardrobe, and then it'll shoot out, whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
Those are all called practical special effects. They're classic, they're old school, and guess what? They never go out of style. People just love them because when executed properly, and I'm sure people could show me examples otherwise, but in my opinion, when executed properly, there's nothing that looks more organic, realistic, for lack of a better word, than a practical effect because it's literally happening before the camera's eyes, so to speak.
Right.
Like, oh, that guy's neck is literally bleeding out in front of us, and the contours of the you know, the movements of the blood are accurate with the lighting. And granted, it's amazing what can be done, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we kind of do the wrap up. It's amazing. One of the things that I noticed while watching this back was just how far technology has come
Yeah.
in the last, you know, 10, 12 years. You know, this movie doesn't have a ton of visual effects. It has a few, and when I say a few, I really do mean like you could probably count them on one or two hands. You know,
Right.
uh, a couple gunshots here and there, a ricochet here or there, a lightning bolt, things like that. There's one really cool effect at the very end of the movie that's CGI where you actually see Robert Englund's face kind of turn into this demon. I think that that is a great effect, and part of me was like, "Oh man, it's too bad they couldn't have done that more." You know, like I found myself being like, "I wish his face did that like every time he kills someone or
Right.
every time he's going to go into this demonic mode." And then I quickly answered myself, "Well, you know what? This is 2010 or 11 when they're making this, and that kind of technology, although it existed, it was just very expensive and very time consuming, and it just wasn't possible uh, to do like can be done today." Um, but I do think that, you know, that's one thing that, and it's no fault of the film or any of the filmmakers, but I feel like this movie kind of fell into this weird category where had this film been made just even like 5 years later,
Right.
the effects in the movie would have looked a lot different. You know, they would have been a lot more like just organic, you know. And again, that's nobody's fault. It's just time's a funny thing, and
Yeah.
what's available one year. Like for example, I tell people all the time, like I've actually used this argument in an editing room with an effects artist when I'm trying to like get them to do something, and they tell me that it's like a little difficult or a little tricky. I'll be like, man, like I can do that effect on my Instagram story. Like I can do that shit. Like there's a fucking filter for that on my story. How could
Right.
you not do it with all this shit that you have? You know? So like it's
Yeah.
true. Like it's funny. Like just like the fucking effects on your phone now are better
Right.
than a lot of the the tools that people had to work with 10, 15 years ago on a movie like this. So
Well,
it's
I mean,
pretty
yeah,
fucking crazy when you
they
think of
say
it like that.
you've probably heard the statement that how they got the man on the moon, the computer power they had then to get men on the moon is less than one person's iPhone 13 these days. I'm sure you've heard that type of stuff, and it's crazy because a lot of it's kind of like they say in the Top Gun movie. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. If you know what you're doing and how to use the equipment you have, you can do a lot
Boy,
of cool stuff.
he got all fired up from that Top Gun viewing
I
this
saw it
weekend, didn't he?
twice. I saw it
Oh
twice,
man.
Tommy. I wanted to make another parallel because it's not just practical effects and it's not just your guys' movie Incubus, but if you think back even on the CGI things, if you look at the movies like The Incredible Hulk, major motion pictures from like 2004, and I think like Edward Norton played the Hulk in one, and then Mark Ruffalo did, 2 or 3 years later, and but if you look at the quality of those films versus the Scarlett Johansson Black Widow, I think from last summer, or the Marvel Universe movies, the Doctor Strange movie I saw last month, the jump in quality also on the CGI side in 10 or 15 years has gone through the roof. Like if you watch those 2004 to 2007 superhero movies now, you would probably laugh at them. You'd feel like this is really an attempt, but it's not working. But now these things look great.
It's true, and you know what you're speaking to right now, just how effective classic practical effects are because they're fucking timeless.
Right.
Like you can't see a classic gag like a practical gag and be like, "Hey, that looks like it came from the 70s or 80s or 90s," because no, that it's designed to look a certain way that's organic, realistic, happening
Visceral.
right in front of your eyes, visceral. So we love practical effects. That's a T-shirt that is available at our website. It's actually not, but it should. We heart practical effects. That'd be cool. And then it could be a heart that's
Yeah.
dripping a little bit of blood.
Right.
And it's just we
Okay.
heart practical effects.
With a little pump on the side, pumping and then a
Hey,
PA pumping.
if you're a T-shirt designer and you'd like to partner up with Mike and I here at And Action, and get some T-shirts out to the And Action fan base, you let us know. But moving on, I think that we've buried the lead enough. I think it's time to get right into one Robert Barton England.
I didn't know his middle name was Barton. That's a cool middle name.
Yeah, it is pretty damn cool. That's why I'm pretty sure that's his middle name. But yeah,
It is now.
uh, that is not. No, that's his middle name. Listen, we talked a little bit about him at the beginning of the show. Robert Englund is an icon. He is a legend. But you never know what kind of person you're gonna get when that legend, when that icon shows up on set. Which guy are we gonna get here? Who are we dealing with? Is it gonna be this prima donna, or is it gonna be a really great guy that we remember and talk about 12 years later? Fortunately for us, it was the latter, and we're talking about him now. And I can say that a lot of people might think that playing a character like Freddy Krueger would mean that you're not necessarily a well-trained thespian, a true actor's actor, but that's not the case with Robert Englund. Robert Englund did a lot of theater coming up. Played a really great character on a TV show called V for Vendetta in the '80s. That's kind of like where he like first kind of got noticed. So one of the things that made Freddy Krueger such an iconic character and more than just a boogeyman was the fact that behind that special effects makeup was a true seasoned performer, a true actor that could embody a character that let's press pause for a second in case you don't know for the younger audience members. And you know what? Frankly, if you don't know, you're living under a rock, but you might not know the true magnitude of just how big of a fucking deal Freddy Krueger and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is and was particularly in the '80s. When I think about Freddy Krueger, it's one of those characters where you can just say the words Freddy Krueger And if you're a baby, if you're a kid, a teenager, or an old lady, you don't have to have even seen the films,
Right.
and you know that's scary. Like, just the name, you know that's scary. And if you've never seen one of the movies, I guarantee you, you could still pick Freddy Krueger out of a lineup. That's how iconic this character is. Like, most people probably couldn't tell you all the characters that are in it. They probably couldn't tell you that Johnny Depp was in the first one,
I think
but
he's
they
the
could,
first one killed, actually.
right,
First person killed in the first one movie.
but they could certainly pick Freddy Krueger out of a lineup. He has that iconic claw. He has that burnt up face. He's got the hat. He's got
Sweater.
the fucking green and red sweater, which is so iconic. So this is a guy who, if if Twitter existed in 1987, if Instagram was a thing in 1987, the guy would have had millions of followers,
Right.
because that's how big pop culture wise Freddy Krueger was. And again, I don't mean to make it sound like this is some dinosaur. Like, go into any hot topic or any, like, t-shirt for pop culture kind of shit, FYE, whatever's in your area, wherever you buy that kind of shit. There's going to be some kind of Freddy Krueger merchandise, I guarantee you, lying
Nightmare
around.
on Elm Street. Yeah, if I could, Tommy, because I remember, Freddy. The movies are called A Nightmare on Elm Street, and there was like 6 of them, and then there was the last Nightmare or Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and then there was like a kind of a reboot. So I mean, he's been around, but I mean, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger really was a huge part of that success because you had to have the right guy. You had to have the right guy underneath that stuff. I mean, and I'm not trying to disparage these other projects, but something like Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees, they had different guys kind of come in and out for the movies, but for the real, and Stephen E would agree with this, the real Nightmare on Elm Street fan, it begins and ends with Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger with the burnt face and everything else, and that claw that you described, like the glove with the spikes. I mean, that stuff was making the national news in the United States at the time because they thought it was too terrifying of a movie for children to be seen, and there were like groups that were trying to get Freddy gone from pop culture because they were afraid of him. I mean, this is reality. I mean, it was a very social thing. I think the V for Vendetta thing, if I'm not mistaken, Tommy, I think that was actually a different series that had V in it. It was about aliens called Visitor, but it was just called V. I'm pretty sure it was more about like alien people coming in. It was like a mini
Yeah,
series
you
on
you might
TV.
be. Yeah, you must be right about that. I all these years thought it was V for Vendetta. How do you like
No,
that?
it was a big deal at the time. It actually went against the final episode of Happy Days, so people had to make a choice. So they're going to watch like episode 3 out of 4 or of V, which was really getting steam, and Happy Days was on its last legs. But V was a
Wow.
big deal at the time, and Robert was in V, which
And
I
it has
think
nothing to do. And just to be clear, it has nothing to do with V for Vendetta.
I'm pretty positive, Tommy. You can ask Pop Culture Kevin, have Pop Culture Kevin do a run in and
I'm sure
figure this out for us.
Stephen E would definitely know.
Yeah, you can write in the comments.
He would
But
know.
Tommy, if I could, I went to the Rock and Shock. I guess it was the premiere of this film, and that's actually before I even knew you on a personal level. And I remember seeing Robert Englund, who was gracious enough to come out for the premiere for the team, and he would look very sporty. I mean, like in a very refined but kind of ready to go. He had like a black outfit on, and
Very fashionable guy.
yeah, and I just remember I was, going to the men's room before the movie began, and I see Robert kind of
I
rush.
love your stories that start with "I was going to the men's room,"
Well,
but
I wasn't
continue.
there yet. Yeah, I was in the process of walking there. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, sure, sure.
And I see Robert kind of sprinting towards the men's room because, he wanted to go before the movie started, as did I. And I see like a fan, just someone who was at the Rock and Shock convention, and they see Robert Englund, and they got so excited. This probably a middle-aged person, and And
Sure.
Robert stopped and took the time to shake their hand and say, "Hey, sport, we got to go see the movie," And it just seemed like a real classy guy who was happy to be there. And
He is.
you know,
I wanna talk about Rock and Shock, but I wanna cover the movie first because I have
yeah,
some couple of cool Rock and Shock stories too, and we can get back to that. But yes, very gracious, and especially if he's there for a particular horror event, like he's going to make sure that your memory of meeting Robert Englund was a special memory. And again, the guy was trying to take a piss, but he
right,
still took the time to stop and say, "Hey." I mean, I have anxiety, but just the idea of having to take a piss and having some guy like potentially coming up to me to like say what's up.
right.
Meanwhile, I gotta go. Then I like, when I go, is he gonna follow me into the bathroom and like expect an autograph? And he's gonna be waiting for me. I won't be able to go. I'm gonna be thinking he's like trying to like, I
Right.
wouldn't be able to get. It'd be awful for me. So kudos to him for taking that time. But let me tell you about Robert and that makes sense. Is a great segue because one of my kind of best memories of Robert, because again, you never know who you're going to get when they walk on set.
Right.
Right away, I realized that he was an instant storyteller and the kind of guy who loved to share his experiences through being the icon that is Freddy Krueger with everybody. And he's a world traveler, because of the kind of his iconic nature. It's brought him to conventions and it's gotten him movie parts on films all over the world. He's
Yeah.
been to Italy. He's huge in Europe. He's big in Italy, big in France, huge followings, even in Asia, in a lot of Asian countries. So it's kind of crazy, just like how worldwide popular the Freddy Krueger character is. So he's got all these stories in his bag of tricks that he brings. And I remember it'd be very common for me to wander around set and see a big group of people kind of all huddled together and be like, what the fuck is going on over there? And you'd walk over to this huddle. I'm not kidding, like a huddle of like 20 people in a
Yeah.
circle. And Robert would be right in the middle of that circle telling a story about what kind of espresso he likes to drink when he's in Vienna, or where he likes to travel when he's in Paris, what restaurant he loves to go to, or what his favorite ice cream is that he's had, what gelato that he likes in Italy. Just one of these guys who's like loves to share. And it's not limited to just food and travel, like he'll talk about good old fashioned old school Hollywood and what it was like being, kind of obviously like you can imagine being Freddy Krueger and being as popular. I don't know why I quoted for popular, but but being Freddy Krueger and being in that world, he got invited to a lot of fucking parties in the '80s, and there were a lot of who's who kind of Hollywood in the hills crazy, all the crazy debauchery and wildness that you can think of. Those are the kind of parties that Robert Englund was getting invited to in the '80s at the height of his fame. So Freddie's rubbed shoulders with the best of the best and the biggest. There's photos of Robert Englund you could look up with Michael Jackson, and
Right.
just like really like all the icons of that era. Robert's rubbed shoulders with them. So he's not afraid to share those stories with people. And in fact, like the whole time he was there, I think this movie was at least a 3-week shoot. The whole time he was on set, I don't really ever recall him being like in his dressing room. Like
Right.
there's a lot of actors, especially like we call them like number one on the call sheet, meaning like they're clearly the most important character on set. There's nobody even close. They're the guy or girl or person. They're the number one. Go to. And a lot of times that person's gonna chill in their room and they're just gonna
Right.
relax. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That doesn't make you a mean person. That doesn't mean that that's a character. That doesn't mean that it's an actor I don't want to be around. That's how most of them are. That they're not gonna be. And I don't take this the wrong way, but They might not want to eat lunch with everybody. They might want to just take their lunch into their trailer and eat it by themselves, and that's that. Robert was eating every lunch with the entire crew, and by the end of lunch would have 2, 3 tables worth of people crowded around him, and he'd be telling a story. So Robert's a really cool guy, very, very gracious in terms of his willingness to share.
Great stories, man. I mean, class act and accessible to the coworkers that he's working with and to the fans, and just seemingly a great guy. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, and as far as working with him, it was cool to see. We've talked about this a little bit in our Eric Roberts episode, but Robert was very hands-on with the kind of clothing that this Freddy Krueger. I'm sorry, I can't help but say it. Freddy's just embedded in my head when I hear Robert.
Sure.
This Incubus character had to have the same level of kind of horror sex appeal as a Freddy Krueger. Obviously, you're not going to ever top Freddy Krueger, but Robert hadn't played a character like this in a while, where it was like the kind of soul reaper of the entire film. So he wanted to make it iconic. So I remember him like spending a lot of time with the costume designer and really making it specific. And he wanted this a lot of dark colors, but he also wanted to have this little like kind of slightly purple scarf that gave him a little flash of color, and was all about textures. I remember he was like one of the first actors that I heard the word texture come out of his mouth, and I'm
Hmm.
like, what the fuck do you mean texture? And just like, well, I want a leather jacket so that we have that shiny texture on the outside, but then I want a Henley on the inside, so there's that kind of cross hatched texture, and the scarf will be silk, so there'll be that kind of texture. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, oh, okay, like as an actor, part of your job is to, well, I shouldn't say just as an actor, it's really as a costume designer, but as an actor, it's your job to be aware of these things. But that kind of next level of costume awareness is, how can I make my clothing even interesting? Like how
Right.
does even my clothing draw your eye to me a little closer without you even realizing what it is that's drawing you a little closer? Those little details that you put into your costume design. So really cool to see him. Again, I'm making a half joke, but not really. Like, a lot of stars are gonna show up, they're gonna be like, huh, what am I wearing? These? Okay, cool, great. Put their cigarette out and fucking do
Right.
the thing. Like
Go for the
Robert, like,
numbers. Yeah.
yeah, Robert was there, and you got all of Robert. You didn't he didn't leave anything back at the hotel room.
He was
He
emotionally
gave,
invested.
yeah, he really was. Um, so let's talk a little bit about working with him in a scene. Again, my first movie, I'm realizing the speed of the game. I'm
Right.
realizing just how fast everything is. And what I mean by that is, I had seen what a movie set was like from afar, being a background actor, but let's face it, a lot of times you end up spending most of the day in a holding room. And when you are on set, you're kind of looking around, you're playing catch up, you're trying to figure out what's what. This was a good opportunity for me to like really be on set the whole time and figure out what happens and figure out kind of what everyone's job is and how that all works and how it plays out. But really, it was just seeing the speed of it. And what I mean by that is, I remember Glenn kind of telling me ahead of time, like, and Glenn didn't play favorites with me on set. There were some times when, I think part of it was like he didn't want it to seem like I was his little buddy and he was trying to give me any kind of special treatment. So in a way, I felt as though like maybe he like wasn't paying attention to me, or like was purposely like not giving me that extra attention. I was like, oh, is everything okay? Am I doing,
Right.
unfortunately, especially when you're a new actor, and I've gotten a little bit better at this, but we all have this, or I shouldn't say all, I want to speak for everybody, but most of us as an actor, it's like you want that little bit of positive reinforcement just to make sure that you're doing what the director wants, and that
Yeah.
they're not like saying to themselves like, fuck man, like how am I going to
Right.
work my way around this bullshit, like. So not that you want an ass padding every take, but it's nice to at least like hear that. Okay, yeah, that's online with what's going on. So I hadn't really heard much from Glenn, and then like I remember like my first close up, he was like, "All right, you're gonna get a close up. I got a nice tight lens on you, so here we go." And I remember doing my, waiting for it. There were a couple lines before my line, and then I came in. I remember doing it once, and being like, okay, okay, all right, let me do it again. All right, let's go again. Did it twice. I'm like, okay, all right, I think I got the rhythm down now. Here we go. I'm gonna nail it. And I hear moving on, and I'm like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean moving on? And that was it. It was like, and I was in no position to request another take. I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
I wasn't about to ask for another take.
Pax
But I
needs a close-up
remember,
reshoot. Yeah.
yeah, I remember kind of like doing the old like catch up fast walk to Glenn down the hallway and being
Yeah.
like, "Hey, so that was like just a couple takes. Like, is that good? Is that everything?" He's like, "Yeah, no, that's good. That's all we needed. We got what we needed." And I just learned that like and it's so clear and obvious to me now, but in that moment I was just like, "Oh, so I guess if you're number 9 on the call sheet or 7 or whatever the fuck I was,
Mm,
you're lucky if you even get a close up."
right.
So when you have that camera on you for that close up, you better fucking deliver right away. It's like, again, I'll use another baseball reference, but like it's okay to swing at the first pitch
Yeah.
because you might not get another pitch that you can hit. You know what I mean? So like
Make the most of
I,
your minutes.
yeah, and I probably was like a little pensive the first take or two, almost like warming myself up, thinking that I was gonna just be able to go and
Right.
go and go and be like, yeah, you know what, Glenn? Let's use that one.
Yeah.
So I learned that like, yeah, you better fucking bring it on the very first take because that may be your last. And
Yeah.
luckily I got 2 out of the deal.
Right.
Um, so that was just it, just learning like how fast everything moves. And then working with Robert in a scene. I remember one scene in particular where myself and another character have to like actually like get physical with him and kind
Yeah.
of jack him up against the wall. Um, and I remember him kind of being rough, like kind of being like grabbing me and being like, no, you can really, you can really give it to me here. And, kind of, being not in a bad way rough, not like, oh, I can't believe he's getting aggressive and I feel in danger. More like, okay, I feel more comfortable knowing that, like, if I do, you know, make a little contact here and his back does kind of hit up against the wall, he's not going to crumble down to the ground and die.
Right.
He's okay. Because again, obviously you respect your elders, and I think Robert was in his 60s at the time when we did this, and he's in great shape. But it's like I wouldn't want to jack anybody up against the wall, let alone a
Sure.
60-year-old guy. So he was really cool and kind of nice about that. But then, and I can't repeat it on the show, but in efforts to get me jacked up and like fired up and like a little disturbed, frankly, he whispered something so fucked up in my ear that was like just so fucked up that I can like still think of today and
Oh
and
man.
like dark, and I wish I could share it with you, but I
You have
really
to
just
tell me
can't.
after the show.
And I was just like if you could see like a cartoon above my head, like the mind blown emoji. I was just
Yeah.
like I was just like the mind blown emoji, like that's all kind of levels of fucked up. And then boom, we went, and then action was called, and that
Right.
look of like this guy is fucked up was on my face. So
That's great.
if we ever do a live show, maybe I can save that one for the live show. But I
Sure.
can't have any recording of what was uttered to me, and actually, I should say what was whispered to me in my ear.
I wonder if he's used
So
that technique with others, or if it was just for you. I
I
wonder if
bet he
he.
has.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
wonder.
I don't know if he's ever used this exact phrasing before. Maybe he has, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if he does, good for him because it fucking worked, and I was immediately kind of disturbed. We shot the scene, and I watched that scene today, and I remember when I shot that scene, I was kind of like unsure of it, but now watching back 12 years later, I'm like, that's a good fucking scene. Like, look at that.
Yeah.
If I didn't look like I'm 12 years old, I would put that on my reel.
Sure.
But if I put that on my reel now, casting agents would see it and be like, "Who's this like teenage fucking kid. The funny thing about real quick about my character Pax, again, Glenn kind of custom made the role for me, and we had been watching Aliens a lot at the time, Glenn and I, and that role was named Pax, which was short for Bill Paxton. That was our little nod
Okay.
to my character was supposed to sort of be like the Bill Paxton character in Aliens, meaning like kind of like just the young, dumb, gung ho guy who, clearly doesn't have the mental capacity to fight what they're up against.
Sure. In
Kind of a
over his head.
character in over his head. So I had this kind of like, I guess you could say like a flat top, and it's kind of cool because Glenciano's father, who is a barber by trade, gave me this classic vintage cop flat top kind of haircut. So that was kind of
Nice.
fun. So as we call him, Big C with the haircut. Shout out to Big C for a nice classic Johnny Unitas flat top. Um, so this movie was shot, like we said, in 15 days and put together and cut together, and a movie company by the name of a distribution company by the name of Screen Media put this one out. And this was an interesting time. Again, we mentioned it with in regards to special effects. Same thing goes with regards to distribution. This movie just, I feel like it unfortunately found itself sandwiched in an odd time. However, it did benefit from the tail end of the DVD days. When Incubus came out, DVDs and DVD sales were still very much a thing. So you could still make a decent chunk of change, for lack of a better phrasing, for your movie based off of DVD sales. Whereas today, that's a line item, that's a number that's just like not fucking there anymore.
Because of
It
streaming.
it literally does not exist, and that's because I mean, listen, it's just a matter of technology, and streaming is so available to us,
Right.
and that's kind of just the way it goes. But when's the last time you really saw somebody like outside of the red box machine buying a DVD out of that it's just it's not really going down anymore. It's
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, Tommy, because I mean I can remember, and for me, time is such a weird thing, but I remember myself. I still have a ton of DVDs, but you would go to someone's, say you met a new friend or something, you go over to their apartment or their home, and people proudly displayed their collection of DVDs to the world, and I remember hearing people say things like, "Oh, I own that. I own Titanic," and people
yeah.
would take an
I have
ownership
it on
of the
DVD.
movies. Yeah,
I
but
have it on DVD.
but in the shorthand of that was, "I own it. I own Jurassic Park, or I own, the Star Wars collection," and it was like a thing where if you had this tangible, physical box with your movie in it, your DVD, you felt a connection as if you were invested into it as one of the creators of it. And I don't know, and I dare say I don't think that people will watch something even as great as Stranger Things on Netflix, and they have that same exact connection. They might love the show. They might want to, like I'll sit through 8 episodes of Cobra Kai in 3 days, but I don't feel as deep of connection if I actually had to go to a store and pay 10 or 20 or $30 for the DVD hard copy of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think a lot of that has to do with, obviously there's always going to be collectors. There's always going to be people who are drawn and gravitate towards collectibles, and they want that item on the shelf because you can't put you can binge watch Stranger Things in a night or two, but you can't put that on your shelf. And I still know a lot of people that like concrete hard media, that they're hard media junkies. They want the real deal item. They want to hold it in their hands. They want to see what the artwork looks like. And I do think that that's always going to be a thing. But at the end of the day, it's just so convenient to stream and it's so easy. I think that this you sound like an old fucking, 100-year-old guy saying this, but like
Sure.
the next generation, they weren't born with that. They don't really know what that's like, and frankly, I don't think they care about it as much. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
if it's something they truly love, like again, there's always going to be collectors. There's always going to be geeks like myself who want to own everything of something they love.
Yeah.
They want to complete the compendium. That there's always going to be people like that. But you got to understand too that like we're movie guys, and it's a little extra exciting to us. The average person, a movie's just like it's just something they digest. It's just something that's there to entertain them, and the nostalgia of owning something's not there. But I'm talking about this movie kind of fell into that range where DVDs were still a thing. I think it even had a run on Netflix, like in the early days of streaming Netflix potentially. I got to double check on that. But not when Netflix was kind of like the Netflix that we've come to know it recently. Um, but yeah, this movie definitely fell in that era where yes, you could still make money on DVDs, but it was kind of fading a little bit. But as far as the legacy of this movie goes and like what it will kind of uh, be thought of to me, I think it's just like the spark plug to so many great starts and careers in this business. Like obviously we talked about Chad Verdi. You look at all the movies that he's produced since then, dozens and dozens of movies, not just here in Rhode Island, but really all over the world. I mean, he's a part of Silence, which was made in Taiwan, Martin Scorsese pictures. So it's like, it's really cool to think that his career that started on Atwood Avenue in Cranston, in the now defunct, it's literally a Dairy Queen police station. Um, you go from making a horror movie with Robert Englund there to all the way to Taiwan to make a movie with Martin Scorsese and
Doesn't
everything in between.
doesn't Chad have a baseball catch scene with his Chad Jr. in this? Is that
It's
true?
actually his daughter
His
in
daughter.
this.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Sarah. And yeah, it's really cool to see that and nice little cameo. And cool to have that memory forever kind of, pictured in this film.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about time and what a funny thing it is. And you see people grow up, but you always have that image in the movie, which will kind of live on. So that's the legacy to me, really just like a movie that, remember, like I said, it was big. It had all the bells and whistles that, a cool feature film had. And I remember thinking, like, rarely do you realize how lucky you are in the moment. And this was a moment, this was a time when I felt lucky in the moment and realized it. Like, I remember saying to myself, like, God damn, I am like waking up in my bed and driving less than like 7 minutes away. Like I literally live,
Right.
within 5 minutes of that location. And it was just crazy because I remember thinking like, how lucky am I? Like I get to work with a horror icon 5 minutes away from my house. It's like it's pretty much the same drive that I took like pretty much when I would drive to high school as a kid. Like it's like
Right.
that quick. Um, so it was a really cool moment in time to be able to make that movie, make a lot of relationships with people. Obviously Glenn and I went on to make a couple movies after that. We went on to make a movie called Infected, really cool zombie movie. Um, and this was my first kind of introduction to the horror convention world, which we could probably do a whole show just on horror conventions because they are a fun fucking time. Let me tell you. Incubus premiered at a horror convention called Rock and Shock, which used to take place in Worcester at the Worcester
Worcester.
Palladium
Yeah.
and the DC, I believe it's the DCU Center. Unfortunately, that show is no longer a show, as sometimes, all things must pass. But for many years, this was the hottest convention in New England, well known for bringing in a lot of fans of the genre, a lot of big names from the genre. And this was where we kind of decided to have our big premiere because there was already some kind of a deal where Robert had already been kind of courted by that convention to go and be what's called the headliner. Uh, if you're not familiar with conventions, usually there's that one big draw that they try to bring in that's kind of a little bit separated from the rest of the pack, and Robert was that draw, and I think it just made sense. Like Worcester's only an hour away from where we shot the movie. It was very easy for everybody who worked on the movie on both sides of the camera to get in their car and drive over to Worcester and watch this movie. And we decided to premiere it there. And sure enough, Robert was there. And this is where I first truly realized like what a megastar Robert Englund is. It's like Mike said, the fanfare was just out of control. And I shit you not, there was a line of people wrapped around the fucking building just waiting to stand in line to get an autograph from Robert Englund and to meet him and to potentially take a picture with him. So that's when I was kind of like, oh shit, like I knew he was big, but like that's a lot of fucking people.
I think I could be wrong, Tommy, but I have a memory of witnessing that someone in that line was getting Robert's autograph on their back in order to get it tattooed. There was something like that where there was a tattoo, a fan that was so, and good for them, but they were such a fan that they wanted Robert to give them the autograph so that they could go get that tattooed the next day or whatever. So
that sounds about right. That's
Yeah.
very dedicated. That is very, very dedicated to the cause. But that's the kind of pop culture status Robert Englund and Freddy Krueger has. I mean, that is serious business when people are willing to tattoo your signature to their body. It's a little creepy, a little weird, but certainly dedicated, and we appreciate that. So Incubus came out and got a lot of people talking. There was a really cool. Robert has this really cool wrist rocket type wrist blade that's retractable and kind of like this giant switchblade, and there were copies of that. Actually, that prop was there that night, and people were taking pictures with Robert and with this blade. And I think ultimately everyone had fun that night. Everyone had a lot of great memories of Robert. Robert didn't turn down a photo, didn't turn down an autograph all night. He was as gracious as can be. And I'll say this, it's definitely Robert's one of those guys that I would love to work with again. And I always say this, I kind of measure when it comes to famous people. One of the things that I kind of try to just remember, see if they'll remember you. Like if I haven't seen this person in 2 years and I bump into them and we work together for a couple, 2, 3 weeks, will they really remember me? And I remember being at a convention probably like 2 years after Incubus, and I was directing movies at the time, which, real quick side note, during the filming of Incubus, I had no intentions of being a director.
Right.
I was not a director in my mind. Directing was so far in a different realm. I was writing at this time. I had made my deal with Chad, and he had acquired the rights to self-storage, so that was happening. But as far as me being a director, that was not going to happen. That was not on my radar. So 2 years later, I'm now directing movies, and I had directed a movie called Army of the Damned, which we talked about. I believe that was episode 3, maybe 4. Go back and check the archives out. You can hear all about Army of the Damned, my second movie, my sophomore attempt at filmmaking. And we're promoting Army of the Damned at a horror convention. I think it was the same horror convention. I think it was Rocket Shock, and Robert was back as a headliner again. And I remember just bumping into him and kind of being like, is he going to remember me? I don't know. We'll see. And I was just like, hey, Robert. And he looked at me and he just goes, Tommy DiNucci. And his like classic, like Freddy Krueger voice, which is just fucking iconic and awesome. And he goes, I hear you're directing pictures now. And I was just like, not only does he remember me, but he fucking like knows what I'm up to. Like
Right, right.
like how does he even know that? Like he must have walked by like my booth or saw he was observing something. He was observant. So he actually remembered me, saw that I was making movies, and we didn't have a beer or anything, but we had a quick little stop and chat. Oh, that's really cool. I heard about your
Sure.
movie. That's great. Tony Todd is wonderful. I remember because Tony Todd was in my movie Army of the Damned, and Tony's
Yeah.
wonderful. He's a wonderful guy. Had a couple nice things to say. Oh, and Joey Fatone is also in Army of the Damned, and there was that connection. So he was like, "That's great that you're working with Joey again." And we just had a nice little back and forth, and that was it. I can think back, and I was kind of reminiscing earlier. I was like, "When's the last time I saw Robert?" And that was it. And
Yeah.
that was probably like 2 years after we did. It was God, probably about 9 years ago now. So I haven't seen Robert in a long time, but
Yeah.
as I'm binge watching Stranger Things season 4, I was so pleased to see Robert again. And I had heard the rumors, like when they signed him, I had heard that Robert was going to be in Stranger Things season 4. And I remember being like, "Oh, that's really cool," and then like forgetting it, and then it kind of
Sure.
like left my head. And there I am, just so engrossed in Stranger Things because, again, Mike, I know you don't watch it, but if you watched it, this was literally like such binge fodder. I'm just like,
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it. One would end, and I'm going right into the next one and right into the next one. Like barely, like literally towards the end, I'm like barely awake, but I have to see what happens.
Right.
And finally, I see Robert Englund, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, that's right, he's in this." And I just like got really this gonna sound cheesy, but whatever. This show is all about being a little goddamn cheesy sometimes,
Sure.
and just kind of like exposing myself for who I am. I just got this like wave of memories and emotions of like working with Robert, and I was so fucking like proud for him. I'm not proud of him because I didn't do anything, but just so proud for him to see that, hey, here's the Duffer Brothers who are on the top of their game, paying homage, paying tribute to this icon. And again, don't take this the wrong way because he is relevant, but like making Robert Englund in the headlines again and bringing
Sure.
him back to a whole new fan base can be introduced to him potentially. So I was proud of him for that, and proud for him just to see him. Again, I'm not age shaming, but he's not a kid. He's
Yeah.
probably in his. Mike, can we get an age check on that, brother?
Yeah.
How
We can
old
check
is
it.
How
Sure.
old is Robert Barton England? But here he is, like in what for some people would be the twilight of their career,
Says he's
and he's just
74. His birthday's coming up. Is born on June 6th, 1947. So he'll be
wow.
75 in 5 days. So happy
So there you
birthday.
go. Happy early birthday to Robert Englund.
He's
But so here
currently
is this guy
married
who's
to Nancy Booth. Currently
here's this
married.
guy who's he's 74 years old. And a lot of people, when they're 74 years old, think about it. They're retired. They're done. Their career is as over as can be, and has been for many years.
Right.
And you could say that, well, he's on top of his game. He's on the number one show on the planet right now, uh, and he's again maintaining his iconic status. So it's just really cool to see him in that spot, playing a very dark character, very challenging. The character, I don't want to give anything away if you haven't seen it, but his eyes are like scarred shut. So I
Right.
remember just like seeing that, thinking like, man, that must have been an uncomfortable effect to be in, for however many several hours he needed to be in it. Um, but just cool to see him, and just to bring it full circle. That's why we're here tonight doing this episode, because I realized kind of how lucky I am to have had those 3 weeks with Robert Englund, when again he had a chance to really just lean into this iconic. He took his iconic persona and leaned into this kind of a new boogeyman type character, that could potentially scare generations to come. So
You
that's
know that
good.
right now at age 74, soon to be 75, Robert Englund for those keeping score at home, is in the top 500 on IMDb, meaning he's still very popular and famous. He's actually number 405, which is that basically what's that saying is worldwide there's only 404 other more well-known people like The Rock
Yeah, let's take
or
a
might
that's a
be number
great
one or
point, Mike.
something.
Yeah, that's a great point. And real quick, just to sum that up, Mike is going off of the IMDb, the Internet Movie Database star meter. And basically, what the star meter is it's a numbers ranking from 1 to 1 trillion, and it has every actor from George Clooney to Charlie fucking Chaplin, to Elvis Presley. Like deceased stars are factored into the star meter.
Yeah,
So it's one of those things where like you can imagine how many millions of people that is that have been in movies throughout the years. And right now, Robert Englund is ranked number 405. That's out of everyone that's ever lived,
right.
that's ever been in front of a camera. So it's pretty goddamn incredible when you think about it. And a nice little nod to the horror community. Which, let's face it, Mike, I'm not afraid to say it because I've been a horror geek my whole life. Horror movies sometimes get this like bad rap as like, they kind of looked down upon, kind of poo-pooed. They're
Sure.
kind of like, well, those aren't, people don't consider them real movies, or they're not true stories. There's a little bit of a, almost like a bit of a comedy of the absurd level to them. But I feel as though like they bring so much joy to so many people.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got to really go to these conventions and see just like how goddamn happy someone like Robert Englund can make his fans. Just literally, like you see their faces light the fuck up just by seeing him smile, hearing his voice, having him get a signature. Um, it's a really great thing. So it's kind of funny that this genre that often gets kind of looked down upon and gets poo-pooed and made fun of, kind of like the ugly, the ugly redheaded stepchild of cinema.
Right.
In actuality, like it touches a lot of people's lives. And I don't know that a lot of mainstream actors will live on 50, 75, 100 years from now. But I bet you Freddy Krueger will still be kicking in 50 years, long beyond, you know, we hate to think of this day, but we're all on borrowed time here.
Sure.
So long beyond Robert Englund's time on this planet, Freddy Krueger will be not just spoken about, but loved, adored, worn on T-shirts, uh, action figures on the shelf.
Scaring
Freddy's not
kids.
scaring kids for generations to
Scaring
come.
kids that
Really,
haven't been born yet. Yeah. Killing
yeah. So
teenagers since 1985. Yeah.
yeah, so really cool to be a part of that. Um, and I think that again, if you haven't had a chance to see Incubus, go out of your way to try and see it. It's a great first attempt at a film by a young, hungry filmmaker at the time, Glenn Ciano. Uh, Again, great movie for Chad Verdi to really kick off his entire film production company with. I mean, it's the trailblazer, it's the pathfinder. So go out of your way to see it. We tried to look for it streaming, and for whatever reason, it's not. It's on Amazon, but it says not currently available in your area. So check your area for that. Just Google Incubus, Robert Englund. It'll come up. You
There's
can
some,
order it. You
yeah.
can order it on DVD through Amazon. That's probably the best way to, excuse me, to actually ensure that you'll get it, is
I
just to
think
order the DVD.
I think eBay's got it too. Just so you know.
It's out there on eBay. And check it out because again, it's a movie that really tried its damnedest to stay true to that old school vintage, again, Nightmare on Elm Street kind of vibe, because that's what this was. This was a Robert Englund forefront star vehicle, just kind of doing his thing. So why don't we go back and take a look at some of our faithful viewers. Everybody, thanks again for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We're sorry about the lack of consistency in terms of the day. That's one thing that like Mike and I were really like serious about when we started this show. You know, this isn't my first attempt at a podcast. This isn't Mike's first attempt at a podcast. We've both been parts of other shows. We've had shows, and they haven't worked out, just to be frank and to be honest with you. And part of that is a lack of consistency. And part of that is not just like being committed to put out an episode every single week. And that's what we're doing. We apologize that we're not on the right day. We really wanted to get to this Tuesdays and keep Tuesdays a thing. But recently, Mike has been traveling a lot and has been really trying to hit the pavement with his book. I have been all over the place with various productions and you know just got off the set of Junction, and of course been working on finishing Johnny and Clyde starring Megan Fox. I ain't complaining. It's a wonderful place to be in, and it's I kind of wish that I could go back and punch that goofy bastard who played Pax in the shoulder and say, "Hey, you dumb shit." You know, in like 11 or 12 years, you're going to be like juggling 2, 3 movies and acting in a couple productions at once, and just keep
Right.
fucking doing what you're doing. So I'm not complaining. Like this is literally exactly what that guy would have dreamed to hear 12
Sure.
years ago. But to be honest with you, it's really challenging to carve personal time out. And right now we're at the point where Mike and I are doing this show on our personal time. You know, we don't have any sponsorship. We don't have any we ain't drawing a big old paycheck to do this. So we're doing the best we can to bring this to you weekly, and we're gonna keep doing that.
I
So
think,
I
yeah,
guess this is a roundabout way of just saying thank you so much for being consistent, watching us to this despite our lack of consistency. Go ahead, Mike.
I think Kim Kaling here is referring to Stranger Things because she's a fan of that show as well. And
Yes, Kim. Go ahead.
Kim keeps me informed on a lot of pop culture shows, like what's worth watching and what's not. And like I said, I kind of binged season 4 of Cobra Kai last week, which I enjoyed. But I don't watch as many serials as a lot of people do. Stephen E has some comments if you want to check those out, Tommy.
Yeah, but before I check that out, Kim, will you help our friend Mike out? Will you tell him to watch Stranger Things
No,
and
she has.
assure him that he's
Yeah.
gonna like it? All right, let's move on to Stephen E.
Yeah.
Stephen E says Robert Englund, the one and only Freddy Krueger. It's true, man. No disrespect to, and again, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but there's been another Freddy Krueger. It just wasn't
He,
the same.
he was the guy from the Bad News Bears, and like he hadn't done a big movie in a long time. The
The Walter
rebooted.
Matthau Bad News Bears? No,
Yeah, the kid that was the
really?
pitcher. Yeah, that was the kid that was, I believe, the pitcher. Like the kid with the long hair, he was kind of short, and he was the pitcher.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
But yes, Freddy's the man. Kim has been. Oh, see, Kim said it right there. She's been trying to get Mike to watch it. Mike, you got to check it out. The
right.
real Freddy Krueger. That's right. Um, Kim, I can't wait for 7-1 either. Robert was terrific. If you haven't seen Stranger Things, they put out a chunk of, I believe, 7 episodes, and now we got to wait a little while, and then you're gonna get the final 2 coming in early July, which I was happy about because they've done that in the past, and I feel like you've had to like wait a little longer. I remember being like, oh man, now I gotta wait. Like I didn't know. I thought it was maybe like wait until the fall until the
Right.
next chunk. And then when I saw like, oh, all right, I can do a few weeks. That's no big deal. Stephen
It,
E, we're on the same page. Tom, well, you know what, Stephen E, we're pretty much always on the same page, my friend,
it's
because it's all
Jackie.
about. I love
But
this right here. This could be a T-shirt, the shirt, the glove, the hat.
you have that on. You have those 3 iconic things on the shirt.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just Freddy.
the non Robert Englund Freddy Krueger actor is named Jackie Earl Haley, and he is a great actor and hardworking. But he was just put in a really tough spot. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly. It's like trying to play an icon that's already been established. I would
right?
never. That's a tall order. Sully's Cafe. It's good to have you with us here. Love the baseball analogy. Well, it is baseball season, so at least I'm in the right goddamn season today.
Yeah, yeah.
Sully's Cafe says 15 days seems like a really short shooting schedule. Is that average or low end? I think that's probably on the quicker side, but about average for the kind of budget that we're talking about. We don't like to always talk numbers because certain things are confidential, but for the number that this movie was made at, to be put together the way it was put together, at the quality it was, yeah, 15 days is about right. I mean, that's a number that often does surprise people when they hear it, but the big equation is, and I don't have a calculator out, but you figure if a script is 90 pages long, do 90 divided by 15. That's how many pages you got to shoot every day. So it's a crazy pace, but we get it done. Um,
I think
Chris,
six.
let's see. Chris Stuckman has discussed the finance of DVDs and changing the movie industry, resulting in less chance taking nowadays. Yeah, that's a fact, man. I mean, again, when DVDs ruled the world,
Right.
it was an entire chunk of revenue that existed that just isn't there anymore. So now there needs to be other ways to monetize your movie, and how you do that is through basically getting a license through various streaming services, and those streaming platforms certainly will pay to get you on their platform. But there's still nothing like just being able to say like, yeah, we sold X amount of million DVDs out of Walmart, and that was that.
Right.
Um, but things are changing. People times are changing, and people aren't buying their media the way they used to. Um, well, that does it.
Still
And
got some more
remember,
comments. You got Sally's
oh, we
Cafe.
do. Oh, gee, I didn't scroll. Please
Yeah.
forgive me, Sully's Cafe. I did not scroll down all the way. Says I did love my DVD collection, and I still buy specific Blu-rays that I can't be able to see, and I can't find to stream anything Stephen King related for sure.
Yeah, I think I was talking about how people had taken a lot of pride in their DVD collections and their
For sure.
Blu-rays, and I still do. And I mean, kind of on the bootleg, pro wrestling market, I still buy Blu-rays from somebody, but it's not the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. But things have a way of evolving, but also going circular. And if you think about LPs, I mean, the millennial generation kind of brought back the love of LPs and record players that had been kind of dead for a while when people moved on to cassettes and then CDs. So, I mean, there's always not just a chance, but a probability in the next 5 or 10 years that these DVDs that you can buy at a yard sale now, 10 for $1, are going to be worth a lot more, and people will have more respect for them. I think people are going to start discovering those director commentaries and bonus scenes that, as far as I know, Tommy, when you stream a movie, you don't get the option of listening to director's commentary. And as far as I've seen, when I've streamed a few movies, I never get any bonus content. I just get the 90-minute or 2-hour movie. So all of that fun stuff that you like, the Easter eggs and the hiding the hidden footage and all that good stuff, that's not happening with streaming. That's only on DVD and Blu-ray.
That's an excellent point, Mike, and I think that that's probably the best point that I've ever heard yet, as to why eventually down the road DVDs could become collectible. Like you said, I'm a big VHS collector. I collect sealed VHS tapes because who was keeping them sealed back then? But I will say this, the difference is, not to get all geeky collector on you, DVDs were manufactured at a much greater rate than VHS was. It was an easier technology to produce. So there are, just from a rarity standpoint, there are more of them actually on the planet.
Hmm.
But I will say this, I think you're right on the money. I think that in 10, 20 years, when kids, and I mean actual, 13, 14, 15-year-olds of the day now think back to, well, when I was 3 or 4 years old, I loved this DVD. They might be nostalgic to go out when they're 25 or 30 in whatever it is, down the road. They might feel nostalgic and want to go, like you said, to a yard sale and dig up some DVDs and look at those bonus features. Because yeah, I think that is the biggest draw. That is something that I definitely remember being like next level. To
Yeah.
be revolutionary, you got to have something very different, and that was very different with DVDs. The ability to you get more than just the movie. You get actually this content, and I did love myself a good director's commentary. I think that is something that being a film buff and growing up in the film school era. I remember when I first really truly decided that I want to be involved in films, I gobbled up director's commentary like fucking crazy. Like I remember some movies watching the director's commentary before even watching the movie because I'd already seen the movie in theaters and I was more
Right.
interested in what the director had to say. So that's a great point that you bring up there. Sully's Cafe, he says that he drives by that DQ all the time when he visits his mom. I went to that DQ one time with Mike, actually, and I remember, I'm not a big DQ guy, but I was fascinated with, and I had never been to a DQ, and I had ordered a shake, and the guy did the whole they hold the shake out and they dump
Yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
they empty it to prove that look how thick this shake is.
yeah.
And I remember thinking the guy was, I thought the kid was like a ball buster, and I
Yeah.
was like, what's I was like, what's the big idea, buddy? I'm trying to dump my classic,
Tough
Cranston
guy.
tough guy. Fuck you doing to my shake? Dump him. No, and
You
he's
got
like,
a
oh no.
problem with my milkshake, pal?
I remember I didn't I wouldn't start shit with the guy. I was just I was like, what's with the dump thing? He just he explained it to me that's how they ensure the thickness. I'm like,
I don't. I don't
what?
like it either, man. Because it makes me a little nervous. Like it's.
Oh,
I.
to be
You
honest
know.
with you, I don't want my shake. I don't really want my shake to be that thick anyhow.
Yeah, and I don't want it to be
You
a
know?
prop for a magic trick. I just want to eat it.
Yeah, just give me the fucking shake. Stephen E says he will definitely watch. We appreciate that, man. Like I said, Incubus, it's a fun ride, and you get to see the birth of a lot of great synergies in our neck of the film woods. Cobra Kai, Stephen E is a Cobra Kai fan, and hey, 5.2 IMDb rating on uh
Rating, rating
rating on
the
on the Kruger
2010
remake.
Jackie
I mean, I
Earl
guess
Haley.
that's a pretty good. Listen, I'm not saying the movie's bad. I'm sure it's terrific,
Never
and
saw
I
it.
don't.
Yeah,
The more movies I make, the more I realize that every movie is such a challenge, and I don't
yeah,
talk shit about movies anymore. My days of talking shit about films are pretty much over.
right.
Uh, everybody's when they're young says stupid stuff or whatever, but I've realized that it's somebody's heart and soul that went into that, so you got to treat it with a little bit of respect. So I'm not knocking that film. It's just to me, it's it's hard. While Robert Englund is drawing breaths of air, it's hard for me to see someone cast someone else to play Freddy.
I agree.
Um, I always say if it was great, leave it alone. Yeah, man. I mean, exactly. It's just that's what's frustrating about that movie. They could have cast Robert to play that part.
Yeah, he was still able
Um,
to do it.
Dollar Tree had a Rocky DVD for $1. Dude, I don't even even if I didn't own a DVD player, if I saw a Rocky DVD for $1, I would throw that in my cart as well. You can't leave that there. You're right about the new generation. There is a YouTube show where they give kids nostalgic things like a rotary phone, VHS tapes, and see if they can operate it. Yeah, I bet you I've heard about that
I've
actually,
watched some of those videos, Stephen A.
and
I've sat there
I
and
bet
watched
you,
that stuff.
yeah, and I bet you if you gave a kid a DVD right now, they would think it's like a mirror. They would
Right.
probably they'd probably take it and look at themselves and fix their hair and
Yeah.
then be like, all right, if you didn't see the label, if you didn't if you took the label off of a DVD and just looked at it, you'd just think it was a compact, like a little personal
Right.
mirror that you have hang on a hook. Maybe you hook this to this hole in the middle. You hook
Hanging
it to
around your
something.
neck like Flavor Flav.
Yeah, and then you can always just check yourself out if you need to. Well, that about does it. Stephen E's last comment of the night here. He just bolstering the fact that we're all original Nightmare on Elm Street fans, 100%. Everyone, it was really fun kind of thinking back on this movie. Like I said, it's weird to just be thinking about anything that you did 12 years ago, especially, work related, start of so many relationships, start of a long trail of films that kind of follow this one. So it was fun. I appreciate that you are here to be a part of that. Next week, we're going to get into something a little different. Next week, we're going to start, we're trying to get a little bit of a formula that to figure out like what works for us. We love doing the kind of deep dives where we think about a movie that I worked on. We love talking about a specific actor that I worked on. I appreciate y'all tuning in on that. But I think that what would really help people too is if we mix in more of these like kind of industry based shows. So Mike and I decided that next week, this one is a little bit more geared towards the actors of the world, but also if you're a filmmaker or a casting person, you might be interested. But next week's going to be all about what a director, what a casting person is looking for in an audition. So it's casting and auditioning tips. What is it that you can bring to the table that's going to separate you from the pack that makes that director say, you know what? Let's give this person another call. Let's look at them. That's what we're going to get into next week. So be on the lookout for that. I say with my fullest heart and every bit of good intentions that we're going to try to do that on Tuesday. But please bear with me. I actually am up for a potential role in a film that's happening here in New England. So cross your fingers. If I get that, we might have to switch the day, but maybe not. We'll let you know. Again, please follow me on all of my socials. On Facebook, you can find me at Tommy DiNucci, whereas on Instagram and on Twitter, it's at Tom DiNucci, as seen right here. Just punch that in. And finally, last but not least, thank you for checking out the show, but please make sure you also subscribe to the channel. If you've listened this far, we appreciate that. Just subscribe. Click the button. It really goes a long way. We're trying to build this community.
Bell alarm thing too. That because you have to push the bell so that you're getting notified when there's new content.
Right. And finally, Stephen E., thank you for those kind words. We're hoping for the best on this one. Mike, thank you for being with us, brother. It's always fun chatting with you. You're my good friend, and this has become a really nice chance for us to get together on a weekly basis and show face.
Face to face. And for people that want to see more of my stuff, go to MikeMessier.com. Scroll down to the bottom, and I've got all my social media links in there. And I'm looking forward to next week, Tommy, because you and I both have various experiences on both sides of that process. And just recently, I put up my posting for a short film gig that I was offering on Breakdown Services and Actors Access. And that was the first time I used that service. And it's very interesting how being on the casting side, when I see people's content and material come in, their headshots, their resumes, their videos, how I realize some of the strengths, but more so the weaknesses in my own material that I've been sending out as an actor. It was kind of like a wake-up call, like, okay, this actor sent me her stuff, and she kind of did this kind of botchy, but that's kind of the same botchiness that I'm presenting to other projects. And so when you kind of have that perspective of both sides of the camera, so to speak, the casting process, it helps you strengthen your own perspective and your own presentation, as it were, as an actor.
If I could sum it up, I'll say it like this. Tune in next week. Don't be botchy. We don't want you to be botchy.
Oh,
If you
AEW
watch
lost.
this, you'll avoid being botchy.
Yeah.
So, thanks, guys. We'll see you next week on An Action, Episode 8, Casting and Auditioning Tips. See you soon, guys. Thank you.